would never willingly put myself.
We.
Take a chance.
Yes, dear.
Nope. I don't play chess enough to have my own set.
How do you cook
Do I look
Brussels
like a
sprouts? You can fry them. You can boil them. You can bake them.
Just like organization, Tyler.
Sorry.
Okay.
How is that world in conflict? All right.
I think it's foods.
We are in the middle of understanding the American participation in the Vietnam War. Last time we met, I had explained to you that it was a French colony, and the French, after World War II, attempted to reconquer it. It failed. That they agreed then to split Vietnam and have an election reuniting it. The southern half decided to ixnay that because the person in power believed he had no chance, and he was probably right. And as a result, South Vietnam becomes a nation, which angered a bunch of South Vietnamese who started a guerrilla. Remember me walking around like a guerrilla? And that starts this new conflict, the new phase. If phase one is, in essence, the French attempting to reconquer a former colony, phase two would then be the Viet Cong trying to overthrow the South Vietnamese government. Now, at this point, there are a few Americans involved, advisors, but really there's no massive American military involvement. What we have to do today is figure out how it went from a conflict where a few hundred Americans were involved to a conflict where 500,000 Americans were involved. What happened to go from there to there? Okay. And here's the first argument for how it went from there to there. Has anyone ever heard of the domino theory? Few of you have heard of the domino theory. Anyone want to take a shot? Explain it.
One country becomes communist, they're all going to fall to communism.
Very good.
Yes. Sir.
So the belief was that if you allow Vietnam to become communist, then the people in neighboring, say, Cambodia will look and say, gee, that looks good to us. Let's become communist. And then the people in Laos will say, that looks pretty good to us, and it will spread. The way to prevent that third domino from falling
Nuke 'em.
is to prevent the first domino from falling.
Honestly.
You are now looking at the justification for American military involvement in Vietnam. Maybe we weren't even that necessarily concerned about Vietnam itself, but our concern with, say, the Philippines. Philippines was had a heavy American presence there from previous war, Spanish-American War. Well, we need to be concerned about Vietnam because we don't want the Philippines to become communist. The way you prevent the Philippines from becoming communist is to prevent Vietnam from becoming communist. Okay. Now you're free to say, but that's illogical. That's not true. And you might be right. What we can do now is look at hindsight and say, is it true? Did it happen? Because Vietnam did become communist. So if the domino theory holds true, that means that other countries also became communist. Does anyone know?
Cambodia.
Yeah, it did spread a little. Cambodia did become communist. That was about it. So is the domino theory proven to be true? Kind of. I mean, you go either way there, right? It sort of spread, but you could also argue it didn't spread real far. But anyway, the belief was at the time this was valid argument. Okay, let's keep going. You are now looking at how it went from a low-level American military small conflict to a major conflict. Okay, it's called the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Anyone ever heard of it? Maybe you don't know what it was, but you've heard of something called the Gulf of Tonkin. Okay, so here we are, Vietnam. Let's set the stage. Vietnam is two countries. There's Vietnam, and then there's South Vietnam. South Vietnam is an independent country with a very unpopular leader whose people are trying to overthrow him, a la the Viet Cong. The Americans are supporting the government of South Vietnam through weaponry, maybe a few hundred American soldiers, advisors. But there's really not a heavy American presence yet. Okay, so this body of water right here is called the Gulf of Tonkin. An American naval vessel was roaming in the Gulf of Tonkin. Now, put yourself in the shoes of the North Vietnamese. there's an American naval vessel off your coast. Now, international waters, it's way out there. But why is there an American naval vessel off your coast? What is the purpose of an American naval vessel? Put yourself in the shoes of the North Vietnamese. What is a possible answer?
Invasion.
They might be preparing for an invasion. Very good. Or
Spies.
maybe spying. Some sort of an attack. Very good. All right. So you've identified sort of the paranoia of the North Vietnamese, and you're exactly right that the North Vietnamese were skeptical of the American Navy having boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. Why are you here? Something happened. Something happened to an American naval vessel. Okay, now the question is, what happened? Okay. The U.S. government claims that the North Vietnamese launched torpedoes, something like 18 torpedoes, and all 18 missed. Okay? Anyone want to take a shot at what the North Vietnamese said happened?
No, I didn't.
Nothing. We did not shoot them. All 18 missed? What are you, nuts? Are we that bad of a shot? We're like stormtroopers in Star Wars.
I was not thinking.
Have you seen that video? Stormtrooper training, and they cannot hit the target, right? Terrible shot. Okay, anyway, all 18 missed. You know why all 18 missed? We never shot them. You made it up. You Americans make it up. Let's go through all of American history in 2 minutes. Name the war, and I'll tell you when they attacked us. Every single war.
1812.
The British sunk American naval vessels on their way to French colonies. 1 for 1. Go.
World War I.
Are you serious? The USS Maine sunk off the coast of Cuba? Come on.
World War
Scoop
I.
of chocolate, scoop of... World War I, it's called the Lusitania.
Actually, I think it was a different telegram there.
I think it was called Pearl Harbor.
World War II.
Pearl Harbor.
How about Iraq?
American Civil War, when the Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter. Every war except one. Very good. Every major war the U.S. has ever been in, there's always a moment where the U.S. says, wait a minute, they started it.
What about the Cold War?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I think Will knows the answer to this. You have to stop thinking of the Cold War as a war like World War I and World War II. The Cold War is not a war. It's a historical period.
But shots were fired.
Die. Dang it, that's on tape. Another tape I have
He
to
told
delete.
me to die. He told a
No,
teacher at Somerset High School.
I meant
told the
roll the
student-
die. The die.
He told
Cast
me
the
that
die.
he wished death upon me.
That's not. Okay. So here come the North Vietnamese saying, America, you made this up to justify your own increase in intervention. It never happened. Now, what we can do today is, again, look at the domino theory and say, well, it kind of happened. We can now look back and say, did this event even happen? And once again, the evidence is sort of mixed because we do know this factually. There were 2 supposed attacks. The first one definitely happened. There were pieces of North Vietnamese missile on the deck of the American naval vessel that on impact kind of shattered. And the Americans responded to that attack by doing nothing. Right? And then there was a second attack, which probably never happened. And that's when the Americans reacted. But you understand you understand the problem here? So let's say that you and your brother are just kind of sitting in your living room and your brother tickles you, right? And you don't react. And then a minute later, you think, I should have reacted. So you pretend he tickled you again, and then you punch him in the nose. And then your mom says, why'd you punch him in the nose? And you say, because he tickled me twice. Okay, now did he tickle you once? Yes, but you didn't respond. that first time, you responded to the fictional second tickle attack. That's what happened here. Did the North Vietnamese attack an American naval vessel? The answer is yes. But the U.S. didn't respond until the fictional second attack, as if to say to the world they attacked us twice. No, they didn't. So the evidence is out about, did this event take place? There's evidence to say, well, yeah, kind of. But there's also evidence to say, not to the degree that the U.S. claimed. Question? God. Okay. Nevertheless, the point here is this. The important thing is this. The U.S. claimed it happened. Based on that claim, passed something called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. This is a U.S. congressional law which said that the President of the United States could use whatever means necessary to defend American interests in this area. President at the time was a guy by the name of Lyndon Johnson. He was the president after Kennedy. With his new authority, the president sent hundreds of thousands of American soldiers to defend South Vietnam. So please notice something. There's been a change. 5 minutes ago, I was talking about the Viet Cong fighting against the South Vietnamese government, right? The Viet Cong are trying to overthrow the South Vietnamese government. Now, we have the Viet Cong still trying to overthrow the South Vietnamese government. We now have the North Vietnamese fighting against the Americans. And to make it worse, the North Vietnamese started helping the Viet Cong, and the Americans continued to help the South Vietnamese. So they're fighting them, and they're fighting them, and they're helping them, and they're helping them, which means they're fighting them, and they're fighting them, and they're fighting them, and they're fighting them. Did you get that?
Yes. Is it like the China situation?
Kind of. Okay?
Love China, but I hate China.
What I'm trying to tell you is this. This little war that was limited to just South Vietnam is now a war that involves North Vietnam, South Vietnam, the Viet Cong, and the U.S. because of this Gulf of Tonkin incident that was in a way fictional. It did not happen the way that the U.S. government claimed it did. The U.S. government exaggerated the actual event. And that, by the way, that's not the first time that's going to happen. Okay? So this now erupts. I'm curious, does anyone have any relatives that fought in the Vietnam War in here? Okay. And they're still alive and with us or not? Okay.
Alive and kicking.
Okay. So
That didn't work.
the war goes on, and just a little bit more here, and then we're going to shift gears. I have a term up there called Vietnamization. I am now showing you reasons why the Vietnam War continues to be, in American history, the most unpopular war we've ever been in. And the question is, why? What happened? Well, part of it has to do with what I just talked about, that this never happened, that the U.S. government was lying to its own people, and newspapers started discovering that the U.S. government was maybe lying. But there are other reasons. So can you see this picture? Can you see it? I should have made it slightly larger. Any of you know what happened at Kent State University in Ohio, 1974? Will, you want to tell us?
There was protests and people were killed.
Yeah, that's right. So on college campuses, remember yesterday I told you one of the largest protests was Madison. One of the largest was the University of Minnesota. There was a protest in Ohio on the campus of a school called Kent State. So the students were out protesting American involvement in Vietnam, arguing that the U.S. government was lying to its own people about what happened in the Tonkin Gulf, right? They're arguing that the U.S. was not justified, that we were going against the wishes of the Vietnamese people. Why are we there? And do they have the right to protest? Is that a right? Do you have that right? Absolutely. It's First Amendment right. You have the right to assemble. You have the right to petition. You have the right to free speech. You have that right.
Not if you're.
Allow me to suggest that it got a little out of hand on the campus of Kent State. Can you imagine college students getting a little out of hand?
No.
Perhaps got a little out of hand. The chancellor of the school said, everyone, go to your dorms. Campus is closed. Go home. They did the same thing in Madison. They did the same thing at the U. The difference is these students didn't obey. They stayed on campus. They continued protesting. So the president of the school calls the governor of Ohio and says, we got a situation here. There are students that are out of control. I need help. So the governor orders in the Ohio National Guard onto campus with guns that are loaded. And they shot and killed 4 of the students. 4 students shot and killed for exercising their First Amendment rights. And they may have gone a little bit overboard, but holy cow. Why would you aim and shoot them? Right? Why don't you just march at them? Or turn a hose on or something? How about tear gas? Right? They shot and killed 4 students. Do you think the American government won any fans that next day from the American public? Hey, in other news, number 1, we just lied to you about what happened at the Gulf of Tonkin. Number 2, we're shooting and killing Americans in America. You're not winning many fans. No, they were the American public. What I'm telling you right now is, how did the Vietnam War become so unpopular? Well, 1, the conclusion the American government was lying to us. Number 2, news that the American soldiers were killing American college students. Doesn't help. Number 3, something called the Tet Offensive. Again, anyone ever heard of it? Do you know anything about it? Very good. Okay, so you are looking at this map here is South Vietnam. Those black circles represent simultaneous, as in at the very same time, attacks by the Viet Cong against the Americans and the South Vietnamese army. All on one day. The day is called Tet. It's Vietnamese version of Christmas. Okay? It was intentionally set that day because the Viet Cong knew that everyone was in a holiday mood and maybe drank a little bit too much, and so it'd be a perfect time to strike. Similar, by the way, you know when Pearl Harbor happened? On a Sunday morning. You know why the Japanese did that? Partly church, partly they believed the Americans were hungover from last night's drinking. And by the way, they were right. Some of the Americans had partied a little bit, right? Okay, same thing here. Militarily, it was a disaster. The Viet Cong captured 0 land. The Americans and the South Vietnamese successfully repelled every one of these black circles. But that's secondary in importance. The important thing is, how did it happen? How did this even happen? Are we kicking butt? How is this even possible? All we hear day after day about is how great we're doing over there. Really? We're doing that great? Then how'd they do this? You're lying. You're lying about how we got involved. You're shooting Americans, and you're lying about how it's going right now. You're lying. You can't trust it. And finally, maybe the biggest reason of all is this picture. You're looking at the power of media. A picture. Does anyone know what the My Lai massacre was? Besides him.
A massacre in my life.
You're right. Tyler just said, well, it was a massacre in My Lai. He is correct. My Lai is a village. It's a little village. A guy by the name of William Calley, was an American, was in charge of a small group of Americans. They were ordered to march into that village over there, find the Viet Cong, and arrest them. Pretend you're William Calley. Your job is to go to that village, identify who the Viet Cong are, and arrest them. So you just march into the village and say, any Viet Cong here? Viet Cong? Do you think Bill and Ted are like playing cards like, damn it. You got me. The Viet Cong badge is on their chest. Like, how'd you know? Well, the old badge. The Viet Cong badge. Like, why did I wear that today? Right? How are you supposed to know? If you are William Calley, how are you supposed to know who in the village is Viet Cong and who isn't? Well, William Calley had a perfect solution. Kill everybody. If you kill everybody, did you get the Viet Cong?
Yeah.
You sure did. Imagine the principal at this school calling the cops and saying, we think there's a gunman in here. And so what the cops do is surround the building and shoot everybody. They high-five each other and they go have a beer. Nice work. We got him. Okay? And if you're thinking, gee, that doesn't seem like a logical solution, that's sort of the
Actually,
response
logical.
to here. William Calley ordered his men to shoot and kill every person in the village. Over 500 people were killed. The amazing thing is that there was evidence of this atrocity, pictures. An American pilot, I wish I knew this guy's name because I think he's the hero here. An American pilot flying over what was happening, saw what was happening, landed his helicopter between the Americans and the Vietnamese. Landed his helicopter between to get the Americans to stop. What's amazing is that they didn't shoot him, right? Because he's trying to stop. He's a witness. It's kind of amazing they didn't shoot him. Then they took pictures. I mean, look at this picture. I don't know if some of you can see this, but that's a baby right there. There's a little baby right there. There's no question that these were civilians. And this picture ran in the New York Times the next day. Put this on top of that, on top of that, on top of this, and you have the American public saying, what's going on here? Our American soldiers are supposed to be killing communists. Instead, they're killing babies. They're killing American college students. What are we doing? And so the decision, overwhelmingly anti-American attitude toward the Vietnam War, led to the U.S. government saying, all right, we got to get out. And so that was the plan called Vietnamization. If you want to know what Vietnamization was, this is it. It was a plan to withdraw American soldiers from the Vietnam War, but not end the war, just to end American participation in the war. And how do you do that? You train the South Vietnamese. You keep the war going. Withdraw 10,000 American soldiers, train 10,000 more South Vietnamese. Withdraw another 10,000, train another 10,000. It was slow, but it was called Vietnamization. So here it is. So Nixon becomes president, and he says, look, we got to get out of there. So what do? Let's bomb the piss out of North Vietnam. They said this. We're going to bomb them back to the Stone Age. We're going to bomb them back to the Stone Age. Fun little fact, which is not fun, but it is a fact. More bombs dropped in North Vietnam than in Europe during World War II.
I thought it was like everywhere.
Well, you can't include the nukes.
Oh,
That's what
I
tips
guess
the
that's
scale.
true.
Yeah. Okay. If you exclude the 2 nuclear weapons used in Japan, there were more bombs dropped in North Vietnam than in all of World War II. Vietnam is about this big compared to Europe. Right? Each of these things that is under the large thing here, that is about the size of a small truck. That is the world's largest military plane at the time. All of those things came out of that one plane. Those are bombs. There were enough bombs dropped for every man, woman, and child in North Vietnam. Every bomb had some person's name on it. Not literally, but you understand what I'm saying. Okay? The attempt was to bomb them to surrender. We're going to bomb you until you surrender. Okay? We're going to force you to surrender through bombings.
Never works.
Okay? It rarely works. Okay? And then part 2 is we're going to train the South Vietnamese army to continue the fight, and then the Americans are going to get out. This was accomplished by about 1973. Okay?
Go back and watch
there's one more slide I want to show you, and then we'll take a little break, and then we're going to try and write another paragraph of our Vietnam paper. So by 1973, for the most part, the United States was out of Vietnam, except for one presence, one spot where the U.S. still had a presence, the embassy, the American embassy. This is the roof of the American embassy. Okay? I'm not going to shock any of you when I say that without the American military there, the South Vietnamese didn't do real well. They got overwhelmed by the North Vietnamese. North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam after the U.S. withdrew and captured all of South Vietnam and surrounded the American embassy. On the grounds of the American embassy are any Americans that are still in Vietnam. There were a few. And then high-ranking South Vietnamese government officials who wanted to get out of Dodge. They knew that they would, if captured, be executed. That is the last helicopter that was going to fly out of Vietnam and fly to a waiting aircraft carrier, which was right there. Okay. American aircraft carriers were simply waiting in the water for anybody that was trying to escape. And a helicopter would land, everyone would get off, they'd push the helicopter off into the water. The next helicopter would land, everyone would get off, they'd push the helicopter into the water just to make room. This is the last helicopter. And we know that because the person who took this picture didn't get on the helicopter, right? They didn't say, wait a minute, one more. That guy with the camera, get him up here, right? He stayed and he witnessed what happened next, which was awful, okay? All those people think they're getting on that helicopter. That ain't happening. That thing could seat about 6.
It's just a front view of a very large helicopter, right?
No, those people are in trouble. That helicopter flew away. The American that took this picture witnessed what happened then. The North Vietnamese army swept into the city, this is Saigon, the capital, and executed everyone with a uniform that's had SVA on it. There were naked men running in the streets, and there were uniforms lying everywhere. And they'd confront this naked guy like, why don't you have any clothes on? That's pretty hot. Or you just dropped this uniform and executed them, right? Awful. Okay.
That's how you do it.
So it says there, the NVA invaded the South, captured the capital, which was Saigon, and renamed it Ho Chi Minh City. And if you think that's weird to name a city after a person, you live in a country where the capital is named after the person that led the country.
Well, actually, it's not.
Well, George Washington, our capital is Washington. Ho Chi Minh, their capital is Ho Chi Minh City. It makes perfect sense. Okay, I've talked a lot. Any questions? We will revisit this next week, but we're going to pause for now. Okay, take a little break. When the big hand is on the 10, we're going to resume the writing of your Vietnam paper. Okay.
Ho Chi Minh is just capitalist. Communist George Washington.
Better dead than red, as far as I'm concerned.
If you just walked in, can you come and tell me that you're here? Well, let me do it this way. Did Dominic walk in?
Yes.
How about Josh Brown?
Yes.
How about Ben Kahanas?
Yes.
Ben Kahanas is here?
Yeah, he just left again.
Okay. How about Kaylee? I saw
Yeah,
her.
I'm here.
There you are.
I have to leave though and get my fake baby.
All right. Good luck with your fake baby. Colton
I have to go get it.
and Logan
Yep.
and Ethan. He never showed up.
I would never.
You saw Ethan Wake?
I thought I did.
He's here today.
Yeah.
He's not.
I have
I'll take it.
I'm gonna need to go to my contract.
Thank you. Will you help me remember? Did we write the paragraph about how we were trying to establish a stable Vietnam?
Yes.
We're done with that.
I think so.
We finished that paragraph. You don't know.
I don't know because I'm doing it different. I mean, not different, but I'm writing it way slower.
I was looking and like your master and topics right there. How did that even happen?
We're going to start in 1 minute. Okay, here we go. I told you 2-minute break. It's 2 minutes. This is where we're at. We are in the midst of writing the paragraph where the argument being made, whether you agree with it or not, was that the U.S. should have been in Vietnam because the U.S. was trying to establish a stable country, just like Germany, just like Japan, just like South Korea. Okay. If you agreed with it, that would have been either your fourth, fifth paragraph. If you disagreed with it, it'd have been your second or third paragraph. Okay. Before I continue, allow me to acknowledge this is not the only way to write this paper. I'm simply giving you a way to write this paper. I'm telling you that you should argue the two sides you disagree with, followed by the two sides you agree with. But there's nothing that says you couldn't write it this way. Present the two sides for the two arguments for the side you agree with, then present the two sides you disagree with. That's fine. You could even write it this way. Argument against, argument for. Argument against, argument for. You could even write it this way. Argument for, argument against. Argument for, argument against. I would not recommend writing it this way. That's a little weird. Or this way. Was everyone uncomfortable when I was doing that?
Yeah.
I know. I'm not even sure what any of this means, but I felt uncomfortable. Anyway, okay. You are done with the quote, or you should be done with the quote that comes from some book saying the U.S. won the war. No. That we were establishing a stable nation, right? You were on the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, you were on the next one. Great. You were on the one where they won the war. Okay. This one. Oh, we were this far. Excellent. We found the quote. This is where we are. Right?
Yes.
Okay. This is the paragraph where the argument is being made that the U.S. should have been in Vietnam because while losing the war, we won the Cold War. Because of our participation in Vietnam, we won the Cold War. And you found the quote from that book saying, lost the battle, won the war, right? Next step is what we're doing. My goal is to finish this paragraph. If it takes 3 minutes, then you have the rest of the hour. If it takes 20 minutes, then it takes 20 minutes. Okay? Whatever it takes, we're going to finish this paragraph. Okay? What you now need to do is, whether you are agreeing with it or disagreeing with it, you got to clarify what it means in your own words. That's the first bullet. This article argues that, or clearly this article is saying, what this means is, tell me what it means. Explain to me what it means in different words. If the quote is, he's tall, your explanation should be, he ain't short. Say the same thing without saying same thing. The quote is saying this. Now you explain it in your own words. Little Cindy Lou Who walks in. She wants a little cup of water. And she says, say, why were we in Vietnam? And I say, well, there's this book, see? And you understand that because we were in Vietnam, we won the war. And Cindy says, I don't understand. And then you say, listen, Cindy, I'll explain it a different way. Write it! Go! Explain it to Cindy Lou Who a slightly different way. Begin.
This one my life.
MAILAI. It's two different words.
Don't go beyond the first bullet of blue. Just pause there. First bullet of blue. We'll explain the historical example in a second. Take one or two sentences, explain what the quote means. It might be really obvious. So what? Pretend it isn't. Pretend Cindy's an idiot. I mean, how could Cindy Lou Who have thought the Grinch was Santa Claus?
It went away. I was looking at my phone and I said it went away. But it's okay. I read it.
What this means is
The Cold War decay.
No. Where do you see that?
Not
The Cold War was not a war, it was a battle.
parentheses.
That makes no sense. But can you come up for my sentence?
Okay, so I have a feeling that many of you just wrote sentences that aren't the best ever. Frankly, it doesn't matter. I don't need you to hit a home run here. What I want is for you to get the process down. That after you quote, the next thing you do is explain the quote. So that if I don't understand the quote, you can say, hey, look, relax, reader. Here's what it means. I mean, if I'm just thinking out loud, I would say something like this. Because the U.S. put forth maximum military effort, the Soviets had to match that maximum military effort. They couldn't do it. There. I just explained the quote in my own words. Can you do it? Nice. Or something like this. Vietnam was one little step in a greater military struggle called the Cold War over the spread of communism. Wow, nice. Thanks, bud.
I'll restate that.
They will be. Okay, I'm not sure where you're at, whether you've succeeded in finishing the explanation, which might be one sentence long, might be two, might be three. Wouldn't go more than three. The next thing you need to do is give an example of what you're talking about. If you agree, then let's go with an example of another war where losing the battle meant winning the war. And I'm going to give you one, the American Civil War. So if you agree with this argument, you're going to say another example of this strategy was the American Civil War, period. In that war, Ulysses S. Grant lost every major confrontation against Robert E. Lee, but Lee ran out of men. So the South lost. It happened in the Civil War. It happened in the Cold War. That's you. If you disagree, then what you're going to argue is that is not why the Soviets lost the Cold War. There were other reasons. So you have to add, hey, those of you that are writing that you disagree, you have to add this magical sentence. This argument is wrong. Add that sentence. If this is you, You have to say this argument is wrong. Then you have to prove it. You have to prove it's wrong. Let's prove it wrong. I've got a couple suggestions here. Pick one. The first one says the reason the Soviets lost the Cold War is because their economy crumbled, not Vietnam. The Soviet economy was crap. Communism's weakness does not incentivize anybody to work hard. That's why they lost. Or you go with the second bullet, which is sort of the same as the first bullet. The reason the Soviets lost was because of the economic problems of communism, not this little war on the other side of the earth. Or you could go with something like this. The argument is stupid. Imagine going into a basketball game. Hey, coach, let's lose the first quarter, lose the second quarter, lose the third quarter, lose the fourth quarter. We'll win the game. Your coach would say, you're an idiot. That makes no sense. You don't win a war by losing every battle. And as an example, look at every other war we've ever been in. Imagine Brave MacArthur, right? He's in the Pacific. He's taking on the Japanese. All right, men, now go lose. The men would look at him like, what is wrong with you? What do you mean go lose?
You ever hear about the French invasion of Russia?
Which one?
The Napoleonic.
So you're pointing out that this strategy was not employed in any other war.
The Nazi invasion of Russia.
Yeah,
That's funny.
the Russians lost every battle and won the war. Same with the French, man. They lost every battle and won the war.
This example that you're talking about right now might take you a couple sentences, which is fine.
Real
It's
cold.
really cold.
Might take you a few
Quite
sentences.
frankly, they don't have the clothing to withstand the cold.
Yeah.
You have one sentence left after you've explained in your example the validity or the invalidity of this argument. Again, I'm not worried about a home run here. I don't need you to write perfect sentences. It's the process I'm worried about, not the product. I'm not criticizing. I'm just concluding from the jabber that we're ready. Is that right?
Yeah.
We're ready. Okay, let's end this paragraph. So we're going to go with the because A is true, B is true statement. Over here, if you agree with this argument, then you're going to say this. Because the U.S. won the Cold War, comma, the U.S. was justified in going to Vietnam, period. Over here, you're going to say it slightly differently. Because of the mistaken belief that the U.S. won the Cold War because of its participation in Vietnam, comma, some people mistakenly argue that the U.S. was justified in being in Vietnam, period. This is because A is true, B is true. This is because some people think A is true, they mistakenly believe B is true. When you're done, we're done for the day.
But we still have 7 minutes.
Relax.
Mr. Potter, what am I supposed to do
All
about
of this
extra
will be
time?
available on the, I will put this very looking thing onto my website if you weren't able to kind of follow, no problem. Everything that we went over, I'll throw on the website. Okay.
Oh my God.
because of its involvement in Vietnam, some people argue as to why it became going to Vietnam.